Hi, I'm Valerie Fatality, and this is my Myrkul Lord of Bones Commander deck. The key to this deck is about protecting yourself completely and making yourself invincible. So everything in here is either fast mana, creatures that prevent creatures from being countered, things that protect enchantments, and ultimately big bomby things that once they hit the field, they're really difficult to deal with. The whole point of that is get those big bomby creatures online. Myrkul will turn them into enchantments if they die, and then they become harder to kill. So everything has to die twice. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to start off with our mana dorks, essentially. Birds of Paradise, obviously, doesn't need an introduction. The card does what it says. It makes us any color mana. We have a 3-color deck. We need it. Love it. Devoted Druid, the most powerful mana dork in this deck, specifically because when Myrkul turns it into an enchantment, it can create infinite mana because enchantments don't die to having -1/-1 counters on them. So this is a darling in the deck. Next, Paradise Druid, again, another tap for any color mana. It's very important that we have multiple multicolor mana creatures in this, just because it is a 3-color deck. Smothering Tithe, the darling. Everyone's drawing cards in Commander, and everyone loves treasure tokens, so why not get a bunch of them and speed up much faster? Also, it's an enchantment, so we have a lot of protection for it, so even if we get it in late game, it can be really, really helpful for us. Sanctum Weaver. So it's an enchantment creature, which is nice because we do have cards that protect enchantments and make enchantments matter. Also, it taps for X mana of 1 color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So the more things die, the more things get flipped into enchantments. The more useful utility enchantments we have, the more mana this taps for, and this winds up giving us a lot of value. Solemn Simulacrum, the sad bot. We love him. He enters the battlefield, we get a basic land. When he dies, we draw a card. It's great because you get 2 basic lands, because once he dies, Myrkul turns him into an enchantment. He comes back, gets us another land. So a little bit of extra value on the sad bot. Absence Pilgrim, just nice to have a 1-mana dork that taps for something that isn't green. That's our white source. Rampant Growth, self-explanatory, gets us a basic land. 3 visits gets us a forest specifically. It hits most of our shocks. It also hits our Ndatha Triome. Very, very good. Kodama's Reach, more land search, self-explanatory. Cultivate, exact same thing. And then we got some mana rocks. So, pretty standard. Silesia Signet, our green-white, Arcane Signet, any color, Wayfarer's Bauble, Quick Ramp, get us more land, Orzhov Signet, you know, there's a pattern here. A very pretty Soul Ring. Hedron Archive. I like Hedron Archive a lot because draw power in this deck is very difficult to come by. There is a lot of dedicated draw power, but not enough in these colors. So this helps us speed up with mana when we need it, and then when we don't, we can draw some cards. It's fantastic. Jeweled Lotus, extremely important in this deck because it is a 7-mana cost commander. I swear it's not impossible to play it, but it is very, very difficult. Abzan Charm, mostly in here for draw power. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Self-explanatory. It is helpful for removal on occasion. Anything that's modular is good, really. We're almost never going to distribute the 2/1/1 counters among creatures. I don't think I've ever used that mode in this deck because there's just no reason to. Yeah, so that's that. Moldervine Reclamation. This is a new addition to the deck. I'm not crazy about it yet. This might be swapped out later on, but whenever a creature I control dies, I gain a life and draw a card, and my stuff is going to be dying to flip into enchantments, and we need as much draw power as we can possibly get. So on paper, it's good. I think I've only gotten to play it like once or twice, though. Don't tell anybody. Archivist of Agma. So this thing is a gem. When an opponent searches their library, I gain a life and draw a card. Lots of fetch lands, lots of tutors, lots of good stuff. So this helps us gain a little bit of life back because most of our draw power does take a lot of life from us. So it's important to bounce back a little bit and draw power. More draw power. Additionally, since it is a creature, it becomes an enchantment that keeps that ability, and it becomes a very good enchantment. Stinging Study. Stinging Study in this deck says draw 7 cards and lose 7 life because we have a big chunky commander. So it's fantastic for draw power as long as we don't get it super late game and are completely unable to use it. It does combo well with Myrkul though, not only because it draws 7 cards, but because Myrkul becomes indestructible once you hit 20 or less life in commander. So it can sort of get you there. Usually that doesn't matter too much in this deck, but yeah, very good card. Ad Nauseam is Ad Nauseam. It's in the deck because it's Ad Nauseam. It gets you 1,000,000 cards. It's fantastic. And most of the stuff in this deck is very low cost, so you can pull a lot of cards without having too much of a detriment. It's fantastic. Black Market Connections, one of our best draw spells. It lets us get treasure tokens when we need mana early, it lets us draw cards, and it lets us get blockers because sometimes this deck is wanting for early game creatures. So this thing is an absolute powerhouse here. And it's an enchantment, the magic word. You'll see later on once we get into the protection spells, really how we build around enchantments. Eidolon of Blossoms. This card is fantastic. It is phenomenal. Not only does it give us the draw when it comes out, but whenever we get another enchantment, we draw a card, and it's whenever an enchantment ETBs, not when one is cast. So every time a creature dies, I'm going to draw a card with Eidolon, and every time we play one of our utility enchantments, we're going to draw a card. This thing is very, very good here. Guardian Project. Another one, it's just pure draw power in Commander, because every card has a different name. So we like to get it out early. Every time we play one of our mana dorks, we get to draw a card. It feels great. Once we play our big powerhouse creatures that are supposed to end the game, we can get something. It helps us dig a lot, which is very, very important. Fantastic card. Now we're into the removal. So the removal suite in this deck is pretty small, but it's more or less just the most necessary things, because we really want to build ourselves up and not interact too much with what else is going on. We want to make it so it doesn't matter what else is going on. So that starts with Mortify, very simple, destroys creatures and enchantments. Easy peasy. Swords to Plowshares, classic for the big threats that are beating us up. Dictate of Erebos. Card is disgusting. It's an enchantment. We have some sack outlets in this deck that we'll get to later on. So just having it on the field, being able to protect it, it's sitting around for a while, this card becomes very, very silly and hits a lot of the board very quickly. Day of Judgment, simple board wipe, not much to say. It is very good in this deck because if we have a big board state and Myrkul is on the field, we can wipe and get all of our stuff back as enchantments at once, and usually that just kind of seals the game. Despark, another self-explanatory removal spell, very, very good. It exiles instead of destroying, it's fantastic. Generous Gift, again, self-explanatory, hits any permanent, we love to see it. Fracture, this one I've been on the fence about, but I haven't found anything that really speaks to me to swap it out yet. But versatile, removal, destroy artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker, it comes in handy more often than not. And then we have our sack outlet stuff. So I believe there are only 2 cards that actually actively sacrifice things in this deck, but they do become very important, especially with this one particularly, which is Viscera Seer. Having a Viscera Seer as an enchantment is fantastic. We get to scry a lot, we get to turn things into enchantments in response to things, which is fantastic. The card puts in a ton of work. And the other one is Vivian on the Hunt. Now, it's part sack outlet and part just keeping us alive. So she allows us to sack a creature and then search for a creature card with 1 mana more than the sacrificed creature and put it onto the battlefield. So a fun little birthing pot effect. But mostly it lets us sacrifice a thing, turn it into an enchantment, and the -1 lets us get a 4/4 green warrior, rhino warrior creature token, and that just harkens back to we need blockers like pretty often to stay alive. So yeah, and it can seal out the game if it lasts long enough because we just make an army. Swiftfoot Boots, self-explanatory. Now we're getting into the protection cards in the deck and the things that really like make us wall ourselves off and make us really hard to kill. So Swiftfoot protects Myrkul. He's very, very expensive. If he dies, it's going to hurt really bad to get him back on the field. So it's very, very important to protect him. Destiny Spinner, the big line on this card. We ignore the fact that it can create XX elementals out of your lands. I don't really care. It can be great late game, but the most important thing is creatures and enchantments cannot be countered that you control specifically. That is one of the most important effects in this deck. We love her. Also, she's an enchantment. It's fantastic. Teferi's Protection, you know what this card does. This card is amazing. It combos with Adnaz. It lets you do whatever you want, and it keeps us alive because, yeah, Farewell hurts, and there's no way around it except for this. Ink Shield, another big boy. It lets us get blockers for later. It lets us end the game if we get to untap with it, because usually we are pretty late into the game and we create a million tokens with this. The last time I cast it, I had 26 power on board off of this. Yeah, so fantastic card in the deck. Sphere of Safety, all-star, absolute all-star, one of the most important cards in the deck. This thing will keep you alive forever. Forever. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays X, where X is the number of enchantments you have. Everything's enchantments. We make enchantments. We love this. This is usually going to be like 4 or 5. It gets to a lot more if the game goes long enough. It's crazy. No one wants to pay that. Sigarda, Host of Herons. So, I haven't gotten too much fun out of the Sigarda yet, but the big thing is spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause you to sacrifice. So a lot of the cards in here are going to give us Shroud, Indestructible, things like that. But we're still vulnerable to sacrifice effects. So that is what she's in here for. You get an enchantment that says you can't sacrifice things, and that is very good. Also, worst comes to worst, she's a 5/5 flying angel that can't be targeted. She'll get to you there sometimes. Next up, we have Greater Oromancy. This card is an absolute all-star in the deck. It gives all of your enchantments Shroud. Enchanted creatures you have Shroud. We don't have any creature enchantments in here, so it doesn't matter. But this protects everything. That this card is an absolute powerhouse in this deck. Grand Abolisher. Grand Abolisher is annoying. You already know that. Make sure that we can't get countered, which is very, very important, as I mentioned. Also, once it turns into an enchantment, it's really, really annoying to deal with. So we love that. Windborn Muse, a ghostly prison with wings. A 2/3 flying ghostly prison. We love it. It becomes an enchantment and becomes another ghostly prison. It's lovely. Anything that makes people pay to attack us, so they just don't do it. Whisper Silk Cloak. Again, just equip it to Myrkul, keep him safe. having a 7/5 unblockable is not the worst thing in the world. This can close out the game. It has closed out the game for me before. It also pairs very well with a lot of the game-ending cards that we're going to get to towards the end here. But yeah, you know what it does. Card's great. Gaia's Herald. This is the secret tech. I love this card. Creature spells can't be countered by spells or abilities. That's it. Who cares if no one else's stuff can be countered? Because we're not countering things. But they can't counter ours. It's fantastic. This has saved me from so many counters. Specifically, him from so many counters. And there's our Ghostly Prison. People gotta pay 2 to attack you. They don't want to do it. Ever. It's fantastic. Mother of Runes. We all love Mom. Mom's great. She becomes an enchantment. It's wonderful. She also keeps Myrkul alive. It's great. You know what she does. The Golden Throne. This is fun and spicy. So this card is mostly in here for thematics. It can sacrifice mana dorks and give us 3 mana of any color, so it can speed us up a little bit. Mostly, we're just going to try to wall up, put this on the field, and if things go wrong and we start getting beat up, this can dig us out of a gross situation. Vexilus Praetor, again, protect Myrkul at all costs. This gives him protection from everything. We love that. If they get rid of this, it becomes an enchantment. They have to get rid of it again. You know, it's great. Sterling Grove, more Shroud for our enchantments. We love that. It also tutors for an enchantment, so this is a great way to get Sphere of Safety, or if we need draw power, you can go get Black Market Connections, you can get Guardian Project off of this. Yeah, that's where you want this to be. So now we're getting into just kind of uncategorized utility cards. So, Ewit, obviously, Eternal Witness is fantastic. It ETBs, you get a card back. When it dies, it becomes an enchantment off of Myrkul. It ETBs again, you get a card back. It's just value. It's great. Worldly Tutor. We love Worldly Tutor. Let's search for any creature. This is usually going to go get a Platinum Angel or a Sarah's Emissary. Those are the 2 big bomby creatures. Those are what we want at the end of the day. And yeah, that is what this is going to get. If it's early game, we can get something like a Shieldred the Apocalypse. We have a few lower mana spells that can help us out, that we will talk about shortly. But yes, usually you're going to go get Sarah's Emissary or Platinum Angel and end the game with this. Blood Artist, we love it. Having it as an enchantment is really great. There's also a Parallel Lives in this deck, so having 2 of these is fantastic. We have a little bit of sacrifice, so yeah, it just gives us a little bit of extra sustain after getting beat up in the early game and paying for all of our draw. Demonic Tutor, best tutor in the game, self-explanatory. You're going to want to go get those creatures that I mentioned earlier, the Sarah's Emissary, the Platinum Angel, Shieldred, pretty much anything that's going to help you win the game, or yeah, whatever else you may need. Parallel Lives, another self-explanatory one. There are a lot of legendary creatures in the, well, that's a lie. There were, but basically, every time Myrkul turns something into an enchantment, he's making a token copy of that creature. So this is going to give you 2 of them, and that's better than 1. Also, it's an enchantment. Arcan of Sun's Grace. This card is fantastic. We can play it a little bit earlier than the other bombs that are in the deck. The lifelink is very helpful, and when an enchantment ETBs, we get a 2/2 White Pegasus with flying, and it gets lifelink from this. So once we start getting the engine going and creating those enchantments, we start getting things that we can attack with and regain some life and win the game. Beledros Witherbloom. Absolutely love this card in this deck. It gives us blockers by making pests every turn. They give us life. That gives us sack fodder. And it gives us the pay 10 life, untap all lands you control, and having that on an enchantment that is also making you this fodder is fantastic. Her being a 4/4 is not ideal. She dies to a lot, but this card does so much work, and it has to be dealt with, or it will just win you the game. Speaking of winning the game, Avacyn, Angel of Hope, one of the absolute best cards in the deck. Self-explanatory why. It makes everything indestructible, so you get your enchantments to have Shroud with Greater Oromancy or Sterling Grove, then you make them indestructible. Now everything is extremely difficult to deal with. Avacyn is just a nightmare. She's fantastic. Platinum Angel. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I can't lose the game, you can't win the game. It's fantastic. And you have to kill her twice. And if I have parallel lives, you have to kill her 3 times. And it's much harder to do. It's just fantastic in this deck. Also being colorless, we don't have to worry about a crazy amount of pips like Avacyn or Sarah's Emissary. Yeah, the card is just phenomenal. Sarah's Emissary. This is my favorite card in the deck. I absolutely adore this card. It gives creatures we control and ourselves protection from a chosen card type. So this is the part where you grab this card, you say protection from creatures, and you swing in unblockable. Or if somebody is slinging spells or doing something silly, you can just protect yourself from whatever is the immediate threat. But usually this is going to be protection from creatures, meaning they can't punch us to death no matter how much they pay, and we just get to swing in past their defenses. This is the end-all be-all in the deck. Sheoldred the Whispering One. We have both Sheoldreds in this deck, as you're about to say. So this one's a powerhouse. It has to be dealt with. Makes your opponent sacrifice a creature every turn. They hate it. We love it. Also, if for whatever reason Myrkul can't stay on the field and we have to start throwing out our good creatures and they start dying, this can start getting things back from the graveyard and rebuilding our board state. Hopefully in time for us to get Myrkul back on the field to then turn them into enchantments. So she's fantastic as well. Sheoldred the Apocalypse. One of the strongest cards in the deck. One of the strongest cards. This card is just dumb. We just throw it down real quick. This is usually my my early game pick with Worldly Tutor if I'm just not prepared to get a bigger powerhouse card on the field. I'll go for this nice and early. Slam it on the table. It has to be dealt with. It's a death touch blocker, so it keeps us alive to start building things up. It gives us the life from drawing cards, so we have that sustainability, and it just slowly drains everyone. And when it's an enchantment, it keeps those last 2 abilities, and it just continues to be a nuisance. It's fantastic. And the rest is lands. So we have very few utility lands in this deck. Most of it is just fast mana.
What are you up to right now?
So we have Beseiju for a little bit of removal. We have Takenuma for recursion. Helps us dig a little bit, but usually it is going to be we lost something a little bit too early and want to go get it back. Grim Backwoods, draw outlet and sack outlet. Usually it doesn't get to go off just because it's a little costly to tap and we usually have something better to do, but it's nice to have that option. And then the rest is just mana. So we have the Urborg Cabal Coffers combo. We have Ancient Tomb, Windswept Heath, and Verdant Catacombs as our fetches. We have Command Beacon, that is a utility land, I lied, I'm sorry. That helps us recast Myrkul if need be, because 9 mana is a lot when your commander dies. Yavimaya makes everything for us, just a lot of fixing. We got the dual lands here, some more duals, Fabled Passage, all color lands with City of Brass and Mana Confluence, the 3-color Triome, and more dual color lands. Naturally, we have all the shocks in these colors, aside from Overgrown Tomb. I don't actually have an Overgrown Tomb in this deck. I need to change that. Reflecting Pool. We do have a Temple, just because that little bit of scry does help just a little bit, and then our basics. And that's that. This deck is my baby. I call it the final boss. I love it so much. And yeah, I implore you to give it a try on Moxfield if you think it looks fun. Your friends might hate it. Just tell them to try harder. Thanks so much.